Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatirons Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatironstuning.com and stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.
Welcome back, everybody. This is episode number 66 of the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Today we have got Scotty in the shop sitting. Scotty, are you back in your car, or is that the Pikes Peak car?
I'm still in the Pikes Peak car. My car's like 6 feet in the air, so.
But it has an engine, which is progress.
And I put an engine in it tonight.
Cars are typically much faster with an engine. Yeah, especially if it's in it. We've got Dussex joining us. He's at PPIR, and we've got a special guest joining us today. We have got Thomas Smith joining the podcast for the first time, and we are very excited to have you here, Thomas. So thank you very much for making the time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the invite. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well,
so you're like the Subaru star of Super Lap Battle out here.
Yeah.
I mean that time was impressive, man. Congratulations on taking third place there.
No, I appreciate it. It was kind of unexpected. I've never been to the track, so it was a lot to learn going there and just crossing your fingers that nothing goes wrong, and especially by myself as a one-man show at that event. A little stressful, but
yeah, you mentioned that, and I guess we were so focused on our situation that I didn't really have a lot of time to walk around as much as I thought. But yeah, you mentioned that you were there by yourself, which is kind of crazy, and it makes what you did even all the more impressive. I mean, that's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I do have a buddy that I normally work with. He does a lot of race prep stuff or even some motorsport teams, and he helps me out. We brainstorm setups and stuff, but he usually comes with me to the events and stuff. And the two of us are really, really efficient together, so we usually can take care of everything. But he couldn't make it this time, so I was already committed, so we just run with it.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, and we should clarify just for people watching at home or that maybe are not 100% clear on what happened at Super Lap Battle. So you went out to Super Lap Battle. We're talking about Super Lap Battle Dakota, and you said it's your first time there, that's even crazier that you did what you did. But you basically were the fastest Subaru. You took third in street class. Is that right?
Yeah.
Third in street class, fastest Subaru, and it was close to a new all-wheel drive record, or was it a new all-wheel drive record?
It was a new all-wheel drive record. I think it was previously like a 222 or 223.
Now, was that just for street class, the all-wheel drive record for street?
Yeah.
Street all-wheel drive.
Okay. Gotcha. Because I mean, I think what DPK, what do you do, like a 217?
He's like a 218.9 or something like that. It's a 218 something.
So I mean, yeah, you were close, man.
Yeah, your time was a 219. Is that right?
Yeah, 219.
Which is crazy. The first time at the track, you're out there like solo, and you basically just checked all the boxes. Like, did you have any idea going into this event that it was going to be as like? What was your expectation going in? Were you just trying to see what it's about, or what did you think?
Well, I've watched the event on the live stream for the past few years, so it's definitely been something I've wanted to do for a while. It's just the distance, because I live in Vegas, it's so far, and I didn't have any expectation. I had sort of a hope of what I can get down to, just based on what I think the car can do and how close I wanted to get to the competition. But other than that, I didn't really have any idea of what I was actually going to do.
Now, do you do sim training at all?
I don't have like a full thread sim, but I do have like a PlayStation with.
So you did do the controllers and.
No,
I mean,
it's actually, I have a self-made seat and everything.
Okay.
It's not like iRacing or anything like that.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, hell, it's good enough.
Yeah.
Is that how you learned the track?
A little bit, yeah, because I did it on the game that I have. I realized once I got to Dakota that the game was not as accurate as I thought it was. I felt like in the game it was a lot more wide open. it obviously is a wide track with the
Yeah.
next one, but when I got there, it just felt a bit tighter in between the corners and everything than I felt in the game.
Well, it's because you were hauling ass.
That's right.
Stay on track.
Everything gets a little tighter when you're going real fast.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
for sure.
Well, and so Thomas, maybe where I wanted to kind of start is because we haven't really talked to you much before. You're in a different area. I don't think there's a lot of crossover in the events that you're going to the events that like Scotty or Dussex are going to typically. So maybe give us an idea of like how you found motorsports in the beginning and kind of how you got started driving and competing.
Yeah, sure. So I kind of got started in sort of local karting, not like shifter karts or anything, but and then started autocrossing throughout the years. I've been autocrossing since 2005.
Wow.
Quite a while for that, and got into time attack in, I think it's, or maybe '09, or maybe earlier. I'm not sure.
Wow.
Actually, I think it was earlier. It was kind of through a friend of a company needed a car to sponsor for Subi Fest.
Okay.
I went to Willow Springs, and we almost won that class. It was like an enthusiast type of class, and we almost won that by like 1/100th or something
Oh, wow.
ridiculously small.
Close.
But,
Yeah.
that's kind of how that started. And then I was around when Global Time Attack started, and in 2011, I was at their first event. I was supposed to drive there in a Subaru that I drove for a local dealership here in Vegas.
Okay.
They actually went to Pike Peak instead. So.
Is that the year that Stefan Verdier drove it and they had their little off there around Glen Cove?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That was a pretty awesome car for sure. Very cool. Well, and so I mean, man, if you've been doing time attack since 2008, 2009, you've been in it kind of from the beginning or close to the beginning.
Yeah, back when Redline was kicking
Right.
around before it kind of dwindled off and stuff like that. But yeah, it's been a while.
It definitely took a while for time attack to really get its footing over here, I think. But I think within the last maybe 5 years, it seems like it's really got some momentum now. And man, this year, Super Lap Battle, it's the first time we were there in person. Dussex has been there for the last, 4 years?
Yeah.
But I mean, it seems huge now. And like the number of cars that are there, the number of people that are there. I mean, I think that they've really started to make their mark and like people are becoming aware of time attack. Like it's just as far as a form of motorsport.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool to see because like when Redline was around, everything was really big. There were so many shops involved back then with like Top Speed, Crawford Performance, and that's how I kind of started as well, partnership with them. And then Redline kind of struggled a bit trying to get more spectators to their events and stuff, and it kind of hurt the sport. And then everything kind of died off, and then Jason and John from Global Time Attack started that, and it was a real kind of struggle to get everybody back in it again. And it's been, I think, a long road up until now. So like watching the car count from Coda last year to now, it's just pretty cool to see everybody coming back out and really building their cars up.
For sure. What is, if you've been doing time attack for this long, there must be a draw. Like there must be something about this form of motorsport that has got you. Can you think of what that might be? Is it just the form of the competition? Is it the challenge of building the car to do it? Like what might that be?
For me, it's the driving. I've always been, I guess, a student of driving, and I've always enjoyed that the most. Kind of building my car, what I enjoy about doing that is just trying to make it reliable enough for me to get the seat time. So
Yeah, totally understand that.
That's really what it comes down to when we're all stressing these cars to the to the utmost. Just trying to actually get out there and be able to run. Like unlike us, that I mean, it's a stupid thing. We still don't know what was wrong with it, but yeah, it was a long drive to not even for Scott not to put down a single lap.
Right.
Yeah, and I can totally empathize with you guys, and I feel for you guys because I feel like I've been down the same road. I haven't really had the cooling system figured out in my car until about the mid last year. So like
Wow.
I've been going to events, getting 1 or 2 laps, come inside in the pits and burp the cooling system or whatever the case. Fix an issue and
Right.
try to make it happen in 1 lap. And you end up getting like 4 or 5 laps the whole weekend. And,
It's tough. It is a tough way to go. I mean, it's from a driving standpoint. I mean, that's a challenge. You know, like if you get 1 lap, you gotta make it count. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. I don't think that sounds fun to me. But like, you know, it's like give me like 30 laps and pick the best one of those. And you know, it'd be even better is if you can pick the best 3 parts of all those 30 laps and then put that together. That would be great. That would be what I would enjoy the most, I think. But I mean, it's from a building standpoint, it is a challenge to try and extract the maximum performance from the car, but keep it reliable enough that you're not just wrenching on it the whole time. I mean, that's obviously a big goal. Yeah, there's just a lot of facets to it. It's not as easy as all those road racers make it sound like.
no, especially not trying to get towards the top of the street class too. Those cars are incredibly well built and really fast. So
yeah,
pushing these cars with a lower budget and stuff like that, it just takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by any of the cars that came out this year? Like, was there something that, like a mirror in that NSX was like, damn, like what he brought the farm. Like he just no expense was spared. He was coming out to set a record, and in street class no less. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but I mean, yeah, there's some impressive cars for sure.
I think watching year over year of those guys at Coda and seeing the progression where it's like 4 to 5 seconds every year.
Yeah.
I think in any motorsport that's kind of insane.
Mhm.
Kind of speed progression. So I feel like once you're going to get to the top of the rule set at some point, so that progression is going to slow, and then that's where the big money comes in, where you're trying to get the tenths. But to see a mirror go that quick, I would say I didn't expect it, but I'm not surprised.
Right.
Right.
But again,
Yeah, I mean, we still don't have like, you know, the tip top class like World Time Attack does, where those guys have what seems like bottomless pockets, you know, to throw all the R&D at these cars. And I mean, some of these cars are getting there. I mean, Ferris's car is definitely starting to get up there. Will's car is, I mean, that thing's always amazing. But like slowly starting to grow up to that point. I mean, there's just everyone who does this is like, yeah, I mean, there's no big shops supporting it. It's all just like us in our garages.
But that's one of the coolest things about this sport. I mean, it feels like it is now, because like you're saying when Crawford was there in Top Speed and like some of these really big shops that were throwing a lot of money at it, that kind of makes it for somebody that's working in a garage or that has a dream to do it, it makes it seem a little bit further out, a little bit further out of reach, because you're up against these guys that are building like, you know, carbon fiber everything and whatever. But like, it really felt like a grassroots environment this year. Even as big as it was, almost everybody out there they were doing it because they loved it. They were driving a car that they had built, most of them. I mean, it felt like this is like almost the pinnacle of grassroots motorsports in some ways.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal with Global Time Attack, is to have all those enthusiasts and those grassroots guys coming out. That's going to be the bulk of what the attendance is going to be mostly
Right.
anyway. The draw is going to be those unlimited guys breaking
Yeah.
records and stuff like that. But I can empathize with street class with like Jackie and Amir, how you see those guys on the videos and stuff, and they're just kind of out there.
Yeah.
But I think the car's getting a little bit closer, so we'll keep plugging away at it.
You're within striking distance, and for goodness sakes, if that's your first time driving at that track, I mean, I'm sure I'd wager that you were driving home and you thought like there's like one corner or two corners that you were like, I think there's time left. If I just would have done this, I bet you I could have gone faster.
In all honesty, I wasn't happy with that time because I felt like there was more in it. And going back and looking at my in car, I can see it, and I did that early. That lap time was done on I think it was the first session of the first day.
Oh, wow.
I think it was I realized that I kind of overdid the tires a little bit on the practice day. So like I went out for practice on Friday and immediately had an issue where I had a hose kind of pop off and sprayed water on the windshield. And I'm like, oh, here we go.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My heart sank, and then we got it back to the pit, and then I'm like, all right, I'm this far away from home, just figure it out, get it done. So I just look at the hole, find out that it's a hose, reattach it, put some metal hose clips on it, refill it, burp it and everything, get back out on track, and then I was able to do about 20 minutes out there. So I was kind of doing like corner by corner. I wasn't doing hot lap after hot lap, but I think it was just a little bit too much on the tires. I only had one set, so it didn't really save me a lot. I think the heat cycle kind of got to it. And then also learning the track, learning the abrasion level of the track, which is really high. There's so much more heat that gets into the tire, and kind of chasing pressures throughout the weekend really didn't help me either.
Okay. So there's a lot of aspects that, like, when you come back next year, you've got other things that you want to check out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a fast learning curve for you. But you also said that you felt like you were at the limit of your suspension.
Yeah, so I guess what a lot of people don't know is that the car is on just off-the-shelf KWV3s right now. There's no custom valving on the car right now. It just I have higher spring rates than what the KWV3s come with, just to kind of find the platform control of the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
I know how much squat and dive how much spring I need to control that. And then I actually wanted to get the weight down a little bit more before I kind of go all in on custom suspension.
Sure.
Well, I mean,
getting them restocked or whatever.
We ran the KW variant 3s on this Pikes Peak car for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
And they were phenomenal. Like Pikes Peak, super bumpy. So, I mean, I think we went up 2 kg on the springs from what they originally came with. And this car was amazing. I mean, the couple times I just took it out to high plains and played around with it, I was like, man, this thing is amazing for off-the-shelf KW coilovers. Yeah. I mean, this last year we actually went with a fill 2-way, custom valved and damped, and they set up the springs and everything, basically the same thing that Dussex is on right now. And I mean, it's better. We have more adjustment, but yeah, I mean, I felt like we kind of found the limit of those coilovers, and I mean, what a place to find the limit.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually raised the front spring rate a little bit just to account for, because I had put a big brake kit on after Long Beach because I just roasted the brakes at Long Beach and luckily kept it within the walls. But
oh wow,
to account for the higher compression under braking, I just went up with another spring rate. It worked out well. Car wasn't bottoming out or anything, but it's just the dampening control is we're past the limit at this point.
Right, gotcha. Man, well, that's
pretty
another
awesome.
big opportunity there. Well, before we move on, I just want to ask too. So, like, you've done karting, autocross, time attack. Did you ever do any kind of like circuit racing, or do you have you done any other forms of motorsports so far?
Yeah, so I've also, I guess, I've done a NASA time trial that's kind of in the same realm as time attack. I've had my SCCA full competition license. I've done wheel to wheel as well. I'm currently just I need to go get my medical and get it renewed and everything. But I've also done Gymkhana, like 10 box Gymkhana stuff back in, I think, 2012 or 13 or so. So we drove that Zenkai car from the Subaru dealership, and we were in that whole Gymkhana Invitational that was at Irwindale Speedway. So
Right.
kind of gets a big variety of driving here and there. I don't really care what kind of driving it is. I'm just happy to get behind the seat.
Happy behind the wheel.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's interesting. So, like with the circuit racing and racing wheel to wheel, like, so there's a road race guy around here, Mike Pettiford, he is all about road racing. That's what he's been doing forever, and he's always getting on Scotty, like, Scotty, you should come out and do road racing. And Scotty's like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do time attack. That's what I want to do. Was there ever a point where, like, the wheel to wheel stuff kind of you're pulled more in that direction, or was time attack kind of always the constant through all of the other things you were doing?
Actually, I did take a little bit of a break with time attack. I think it was because I went back to Super Lap in 2019, and the last time before that I had ran this car at Button Willow was about 16 weeks prior to that. So there was a little bit of break, but in between that, I was doing Optima Ultimate Street Car with this car as well. And then I did wheel-to-wheel racing for about 5 years with SPCA and doing Optima kind of at the same time. So
Okay.
kind of hand in hand going along.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of those things, especially the Gymkhana, like, that develops a lot of. I mean, that's all car control, like in car control in kind of extreme circumstances, which is, that's definitely a good skill to have. Do you think that all of that experience? I'm sure that all of that experience just pours into time attacks. Like, when I mean, to learn a new track, as complicated as code, as fast as you did, and to be as fast as you were, that tells me that you can learn a track quickly. You're able to assess the track quickly and find speed, find pace. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure that all of that is because of all the prior experience that you have that is just kind of built it up to get you prepared to where you are now.
Sure. It definitely does. Any seat time, I think, always helps. I know a lot of people kind of negate autocrossing, but autocrossing, in my opinion, it can be mentally stressful because everything is changing direction at a high rate, and then you have to process that at the same rate as well or faster. So when you get on a road course, at least when I started road course racing with time attack, it was processing at such a slower rate. It was easy. So I've always kind of gravitated back to autocrossing as sort of a training. But
Sure. Well, there's
a lot more, I think, mental state. I think it's a little more. People just get on there and see a sea of codes, and they're like, "Where do I go?"
Yeah.
Keep your eyes forward where you need to go and process what needs to happen too with the car. It's just kind of a lot at one time.
Yeah. Well, and really, like, the autocross environment where you're not the amount of time that you have in the car on the circuit is very limited. And so you don't have a lot of repetition to learn the course and get fast. You don't have a lot of opportunities to put down your fast time. And that applies directly to time attack in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I completely agree. It kind of goes with having a good setup on your car and knowing that setup, which makes it predictable. so that you can just take it to that limit the first time and know it's not going to kill you.
Yep. Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just saying, like, getting back to, or going to Coda, I think it even brought me, because I do like high speed, flat out corners in my car. So like if I can get the balance right, I definitely can attack a lot harder sometimes. And I do like the technical stuff too, because even my first couple laps at Coda, I was kind of like, where am I going?
Yeah.
I was a little bit struggling like the first couple laps. I'm like, oh, I got to get it together. And then I just focused and threw it down on the first session the second day, and it kind of came together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not an easy thing to do.
I definitely think autocross helps with like new tracks, because you kind of, the more you autocross, the more you like pick up like, okay, I need to do this here, I need to do that there, and you kind of get like that. You can pick up that sight and that feel before you get out there on track. And I mean, I do that quite a bit too, and have a big history with that. And then you go to these new tracks, and yeah, you might not drive it the best the first time you go out there, but you can still put down a hot lap because you kind of take that same approach, you know, like from autocross, bringing it into like a new road course that you've never been to before.
Yeah, and kind of one thing that I always try to tell people, like even autocrossing or road coursing, is when you're trying to find speed, stop, like don't try to find it in one single corner. You want to find it incrementally and then raise that bar incrementally, and it'll equate to a larger amount of time over the course of the track. There's a lot of people just going to go in super hard. Oh, I'm going to make it all just by staying flat on this one corner. And it's not always going to be the case. It could compromise the entry to the next corner or something else that could be a bigger gain.
Yeah. And you can get fixated on one thing, which maybe is at the beginning of the lap. And if you don't feel like you hit it, mentally takes you out of it. You're not focusing on the rest of the lap. You're not maybe doing what you need to do to put in a good rest of the lap. And then all of a sudden you've lost the whole thing.
Yeah. And like with autocrossing, your line is really important, because I think of it not as multiple corners, but as one single line throughout the course when you're autocrossing, because they all have to be linked. You're off on one corner, it's going to ruin three. And so you've got to be really focused on where you need to place the car at the right time all the time.
Yeah. When you're doing a lot of autocrossing, did you walk the course like often? Is that something that you did pretty often?
Yeah, so anytime in the mornings before the event starts, there's always the open course walk. Depending on how difficult the course is, I'll take note of certain areas and sections and stuff like that. A lot of people, like nationally, will take notes and then review it like that. So.
Did you have the chance to go out and do the course walk at Coda?
I did, and I got my steps in for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it took probably almost an hour to walk that whole course, but
yeah.
And that's moving, because that's a long track.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I started running the back straight because the security was coming around telling us we were taking too long.
Taking too long, man.
I remember they said, yeah, there's an hour for the course walk. I'm like, who can do that in an hour?
You're running
on a bike.
taking notes at the same
Yeah.
time.
Was there anything that you saw when you're walking the track at Coda that like you took note of that you wanted to make sure you tried to apply when you were driving the course?
Yeah, so anytime that I get to do a course walk or any track walk or anything like that, a lot of things I try to take into account are like track undulations, bumps, patches, any asphalt changes or anything like that. Something that's going to upset the car, that's going to have inconsistencies in grip, so that you can place the car accordingly to account for that. Like you're going into a high grip area, knowing the exit's going to have lower grip, you might want to be a little bit tighter to push the speed, because you know the car is going to move a little bit in the lower grip section. But I was so surprised with Coda how clean that track was. coming from all these tracks in Vegas and California, they're so dirty all the time. It's always dusty.
Right.
That track was just immaculate. There wasn't any dirt on that track. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
We stuck around for the award ceremony, and we were standing there watching everybody up at the podium. And I remember at one point there was this truck that drove by on the track, and I don't know exactly what it had, but it was pulling something behind it that looked like almost some kind of a fabric that it was basically trying to take all the dust back off the track. I mean, I can only imagine how much time that grounds crew spends just like manicuring that track. It's just, which is, yeah, most tracks, I mean, that track is spoiled compared to any other track in the United States, probably.
Yeah, most they go to Buttonwillow and you just see like the street sweeper just kind of sweeping the gravel off the side, but
yeah,
they were really making sure that track was immaculate for the next day or the next group that was going out.
Yeah.
It was impressive to see. I've never been to a track that high scale.
Yeah, I mean, right when we were packing up to leave, the real-time racing Acura new NSX showed up, and then one of the Ferrari Challenge cars showed up. Like, so I mean, everyone should feel very lucky to even get to drive that track when you see stuff like that show up after. Like, get out of here, scrubs. Real cars are showing up.
Yeah.
Sure. 5 of those cars are worth half of the paddock. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I had a buddy that was working with some of the Ferrari Challenge guys. So like as we were coming in on Thursday doing load in, he's like, "Hey, check out some of those cars." And I took some video right before unloading all my stuff. But, yeah, it's really cool to see that stuff.
Very cool.
There was a guy who in testing ran one of the new Ferrari Challenge cars and ran a 203.
Wow.
In testing.
Wow.
So I mean, it just shows you how fast those things truly are, really.
Yeah.
And how much further we have to go.
Definitely.
Yeah. Ferris is there. But yeah, it's just everybody else just has to play a little catch up.
Yeah, he's been on a really fast progression as well. I was on a lap at Long Beach. They sent me out of the hot pit, and I go around the planter. I always check my mirrors. Nobody's coming down. As soon as I get out of the planter, the turn behind it, he's right behind me. I'm like, nobody was there a second ago.
Wow. Yep. Man. Yeah,
How was that experience? How was Long Beach? That has to be like wild, man.
Yeah, that was definitely like complete bucket list. I know initially I had to get on the wait list, and I was like, oh man, I don't know if it's gonna happen or whatever. And then finally got the email from Jason, and just being on that track is just amazing. I really enjoy. I watch a lot of like IMSA racing and IndyCar stuff, so I follow that stuff, and just being on the same circuit with that they've driven, there's so much behind that track. It's just amazing. And
that's so cool.
I was emailing Jason. I saw him at SEMA. I was like, "Hey, when are we gonna go back to Long Beach? When are we gonna go back? What's going on? And how's that going?" But I don't think we're gonna make it back.
Oh.
Yeah, not this year, but I mean, you never know. Long term, let's hope. I hopefully they get back out there again.
Yeah,
it's crazy to think that Time Attack has taken you. Like, you think about that. Time Attack took you to Long Beach, and Coda, and all these other places. I mean, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, definitely is pretty cool. That was one of the reasons why I jumped at Long Beach. It's what are the chances? We haven't, Time Attack hasn't been there in such a long time. They did a very long time ago with some of the old like FX Motorsports, the NSX, and those guys were all there. But like, if it doesn't happen for another 10 years, at least I can say I was able to do it.
Yeah, there you go.
And to drive that track at speed.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy the walls too, because like it's just, you got to be so focused. Your equipment has to be on par. I didn't have the best brakes there, so it made it a little nerve-wracking. But
Yeah.
still, I think if I would have had the brakes that I had on the car now, I probably could have gave Jackie a little bit of a run. But
Can you tell us what you had before and what you have now? What the change that you made was?
yeah, so kind of through the years, the stock system had kind of been doing the job, and I had upgraded two-piece rotors and pads and everything, like everybody else. And then about 2019, the car kept getting faster, and the stock system just started to struggle. So I tried to go to a different kit, didn't work out. So then in interim, I had to go back to the stock set, but then I kind of rebuilt it a bit more. Did stainless steel pistons in the factory calipers, titanium backing plates, just brake ducts, trying to do everything I can to make the stock system work. And then I just found out at Long Beach that it's just not big enough. Can't dissipate the heat quick enough. And now I'm with the AP9668 kit.
Heck yeah,
Okay.
man.
The radicals, yeah.
I was so
Love those
excited.
things.
One of the biggest things, like for my car, is that I'm always trying to get the biggest performance per dollar.
Mm.
Not the most expensive, but trying to spend my money wisely, basically, to make sure that I get what I'm trying to achieve out of the least amount of money.
Right.
Purchasing thinking about purchasing the AP kit in the past, it's just like, man, that kit is so expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
I just need somebody to tell me, hey, you will get X amount of performance on this kit. It'll help me mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have only talked to Ryan, because he can't shut up about those things.
It's true. But for good reason. I mean, it's like when you talk about the performance difference of that kit compared to, like, I mean, for a while we were running like a stop tech brake kit, and like, man, like these big AP kits, I mean, that is a whole different ballpark. Like that brake kit is
Big old
designed,
pad.
yeah, it is designed to live at the racetrack and just turn
Yeah.
laps and laps and laps. That's what it's designed to do.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the aspects that I liked about it. It's a purpose-built kit. It's not like, oh, this is a weekend track kit or something like that. And I looked at a few different kits. I looked at StockTech, Alcon, but I was just like, I got to go with the biggest and baddest. Like, if I can't put brakes on this car, I can't even use it anymore. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were at that point where you had to make a change. So,
yeah, especially after Long Beach, because there was just photos that I was getting from some of the photographers. Like, I'm like 2 quarters after a big braking zone, and the rotors are still glowing.
wow.
Wow.
I had added a brake duct kit on the car before, even with the titanium backing plate. It just couldn't dissipate the heat.
Yeah.
And they were,
That's
some of
pretty
the
wild.
photographers were telling me that I was like starting to be known as the guy with the glowing rotors. And I was like, oh,
Wow. That's not how you want to be known.
no.
That is not the reputation you want. No.
Yeah, and then so like I had an all new brake pads and everything was new going into Long Beach, and I just roasted all of it. And I had a backup set of brake pads off BTC 70s that I had to put on for the last session on Sunday, and they held a little bit longer, but I tried to do 3 back-to-back laps, and by the 3rd lap, I blew the braking zone going into the first turn and had to take the escaper in. So,
Gotcha.
it
Man.
was
That's spooky.
Yeah. Well, and it breaks for one of those things, like, you know, a radical kit is an expensive investment in the car, but man, like having been through that experience, not having confidence in brakes, that can throw everything off. Like if you don't have the confidence that you hit that brake pad or brake pedal and the car's going to stop, your all of your lap, it just changes immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've driven other cars where we put a pad on. There was actually a Lemons race I did a long time ago, and they had put brand new pads on the night before, and I go out for I was like the second stint out of 4 drivers, and start my stint, and like 35 minutes in, I'm like, hey, the pedal's going a little bit low. Try to make it last a little bit longer. And I was like, all right, I can't can't do it. I can't stop. So I come in and the piston had cookie cuttered the brake pad backing. And I went through the whole pad, and it was using the piston to stop the car. And I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
Had a few experiences, and I did have one time where I had a failure of a brake line on one of the Las Vegas road courses.
Oh man.
A lemon car going into a turn, the line failed, the pedal went straight to the floor. And I was like, oh, here we go. Yeah.
That is not fun.
It was
Good
rough.
old Lemons cars.
Yeah.
Man. All right. So I've got a question for you. You've talked about a lot of these examples about where the car wasn't ideal. So like, you're saying how the brakes at Long Beach were not ideal. And I want to ask you if you thought about this or not, but like the difference of driving the car how you want to drive the car and driving the car how you need to drive the car. Like if you know that there's a deficiency, trying to drive around it, but working within, like, okay, I can't use these brakes as hard as I want to on every single corner. Where can I use them? Where can I go easy on them? And how can I find time doing that? I mean, is that something that you consciously do? Like, are you always evaluating the car that way when you're on track, or I don't know?
Yeah, definitely. That's it's kind of a corner by corner, situation by situation evaluation that you, even just as a racing driver, you need to do. But I think the better the car is, obviously, the less you have to do that. But I feel like I've always kind of had some sort of issue that I've always had to drive around, whether it's not having enough dampening, brake failure, pushing coolant, or low power, or something like that.
Or fuel cut, or rocks and radiators.
Actually,
I mean, there's always something.
Yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
the fucking crankcase.
Yeah, even at Coda, even if you look at my fastest lap, you kind of see my head bob sometimes. And I was actually hitting boost cut because I was having an over boosting issue. So I was actually trying to, and it was happening more fourth, fifth, and sixth. And I was trying to short shift it to allow it to not happen, because it seemed to be more towards 7,000 RPM or so, or 65. So I was driving around that as well, and I was texting my tuner, and like, hey, brainstorm with me. I've checked everything. Wastegate lines have been replaced prior to the event. And he was like, oh, just tape off. Everything's good, and it's still over boosting. He's like, just tape off the filter to see if that helps. So then, like, the air intake that I have on the front of the car and the bumper, I just taped it off without no more over boosting issues. But
wow,
that was well past that hot lap. So
Yeah.
still driving around issues.
So basically, it seems like there was maybe like a ram air effect happening because of the way that you had your intake to the front, and that was causing the overboost.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Partnered with the cold temperatures and air density, things like that.
Mhm.
Like I have a huge, like, 9-inch K&N filter.
Okay.
I just, at one point, I was like, the car was kind of losing more up top. So I was like, all right, 4-inch intake, increase the filter, get everything we can into the engine. So,
Yeah. Were you surprised how cold it was in the mornings?
I was. I checked the weather, and it wasn't supposed to be that cold. And
It was surprisingly cold.
very chilly. That first session that I was out with Ryan's group, it was like 30 degrees.
Yeah.
It was crazy. It, like, did
Yeah,
not
that's when I
expect that
had
for
random,
Texas.
the waving point by. I was like, sorry, get the boat wagon.
Yeah, that was another thing that kind of had me chasing tire pressures too, because what we initially looked at the weather and what I was kind of planning on, it wasn't really going together. So like I think it was the first day, it ended up being like almost 70, and it was like super warm. So the day before it was like 30 degrees.
Yeah. We're used to very like temperature fluctuations like that in Colorado, but like going to Texas, I mean, I figured it was just going to be like really hot every day.
Maybe not really hot, but nice.
Well,
Nicer
yeah,
than
nice.
I mean, the first year we went I went with Ryan to Super Lap Battle at Coda. I'm like, it's Texas. I'm just gonna bring a sweatshirt. And that first Saturday was probably one of the most miserable I've ever been. It was just like that extra humidity. I mean, it was only like 42 degrees, but that I was miserable. I was over it. I was done. I wanted to go home. So
in the morning, you could see your breath in the morning, you know, that first year.
So I planned this year.
The Thursday where I was unloading it was super cold at night. I had 2 sweatshirts on, my beanie, everything, just trying to unload real quick and get back to the hotel. But yeah. Then I didn't actually have a garage. I didn't buy a garage through the registration. So then when I got there and realized like being in the back of the paddock really isn't where you want to be. You don't really get a lot of photographers and people don't see you. It's not as easy to go out on track and stuff. So I was like, I went and talked to Jason and was like, hey, is any garages available? And at first there wasn't. He had sold out. But he texted me later and one had opened up. And that's kind of where we ended up.
Nice.
Yeah, you lucked out there. You had a good spot.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Because actually Jackie he had told me after the fact that they wanted all that spot for all the Supers. I think there were 6 or 7 Supers in the street class. So I was like,
wow,
making an impact out here.
Yeah.
So you only had to beat like 6 or 7 Supras?
That's it.
Like that.
Yeah. Well, man,
Can we talk about your car, Thomas? I want to talk about this car. Like I think the biggest mystery right now is what is up with that car.
Well, but real quick, because what you said about the tuner telling you to put the tape over the filter, that's pretty awesome. I noticed you're wearing a Delicious Tuning shirt. Was that Delicious Tuning? Maybe Bill knows that was giving you that pointer.
Yeah, and I worked with him back when I drove that other Subaru. We were sponsored by Crawford back in the day. It was quite a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I talked to Bill a bunch way back when they came out with the BRZ Turbo Kit, because we had a customer that got that, and he was one of the guys that spearheaded that, the development of that flashing. And I haven't talked to him a lot since, but yeah, he is a super sharp guy, and it's very cool to see everything that he's been able to do with Delicious Tuning.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Hal, and your car.
And your car. Yeah. Yes, but so when I talked to you a little bit on the pit walk about your car, and I looked in the engine bay, and knowing what times you were putting down, like the thought that occurs to me is, one, there's a philosophy here. There's a lot of thought that has gone into this car, and in looking at it, and like you're telling me about all like the AN fittings and why you made everything AN fittings stuff. I think your car is like the definition of it is greater than the sum of its parts. Like there's a really good build philosophy into it, and like you're just getting this massive amount of performance out of this car that, like, I mean, it looks really cool, but nothing is over the top. You know, like you're talking about like the Zen K car, like you look at that car and it's like, well, this car is bananas. Like there's nothing that I would look at your car and go like, it's like crazy over the top, but it is super fast. So how did you get to that point? Like what are some of the iterations? What are some of the lessons that you learned to get you to this point?
I think I've always had kind of the same philosophy of the car has to be balanced, and not just in a suspension aspect, but not one aspect of the car should be like the strongest standout point. I just want them all at the same level, and then everything working how it should. And if that works out in my idea, then I can extract the most out of the car as a driver. So, like with all the items in the engine bay and stuff like that, everything that I've kind of done is just been to solve an issue, to make the car more reliable, to give myself more seat time. And pretty much, I don't really like waste anything on aesthetics too much. Like, yeah, it has delivery. I did that for Long Beach and stuff.
Sure.
Just because I wanted the car to pop a little bit, but I definitely kind of have me and my friend Eladio that we do the setup and we go to track days and stuff, we always have this saying, doing more with less.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of a joke between us, but it's definitely something that I take to heart. But obviously, I don't have the budgets some of the other guys have, some of the other teams and stuff. So I definitely need to make the most of what I have on my car all the time. So just making sure like it stays cool. Like the headers on my car, like I have them coated, heat wrap, and then another layer of heat wrap, which also helps performance too, but it reduces engine bay, ambient temp,
Yep.
so like less heat soak, allows the engine to operate much at a cooler temperature. And just making sure that everything's balanced, stuff like that. That's kind of been my philosophy.
Yeah. Well, and I touched on it, but could you go into some detail how you like basically all the lines in the engine bay are, you said they're AN fittings, AN lines. And when you told me why, I was like, yeah, that makes complete sense. So can you tell the people at home like why you did that?
And one question, do you weld? Did you do all that yourself?
I don't weld. That is quickly becoming my shortcoming as the car becomes more custom. And I need to learn quickly because I have lots of ideas. But
Okay.
definitely. So like my thing that we were talking about at the track was there's always, especially with where like the turbo placement and stuff in these cars very near the firewall, and every time like you change something on a car that like that hose that's held with a hose clamp or anything, it's almost unusable again, especially if it's near a heat source. So making sure that I have an AN hose that's fire sleeved, or I can quick connect or disconnect quickly and reattach it. There's not going to be any, I'm not going to have to replace that hose every time I take it off, which adds to maintenance costs. Yeah, the initial investment to that item is maybe higher than just a regular like heater hose or something like that, but I think it pays off quickly, especially the more events you do that you don't have to mess with something. Like I remember 2 times ago, I had to pull the engine. I think it was 2019. I had the engine out. I did a refresh. And yeah, you're just going through it. But back when I actually did head gaskets on the car last year, pulling the engine again was so much easier. Like it saves you so much time. You just disconnect that hose real quick, unscrew it, put it to the side, and then just move on to the next thing. You're not sitting there trying to twist the hose to break the seal, and then maybe the hook breaks off or something. It's just a pain. It saves a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, and like there's something about the reliability of the connection of an AN fitting too, versus like a hose and hose clamps. It's like when we were doing the water pump and we got everything back together, we're pressure testing the cooling system and like pumping it up, getting the pressure up a little bit, and all of a sudden you hear this, like, oh, what happened? And like, oh, well, this hose clamp was loose, this hose clamp was missing.
No, I just forgot. I forgot to put the hose clamps on. I just left them halfway in the middle of the hoses. I was fucking over it by that point.
Yep. Like an AN fitting, it just done. Like
yeah, and that's another thing too, is that hose clamps loosen up over time. The hose degrades or it swells depending on which fluid is going through it, especially power steering. Like I had a 2020 super lap battle at Willow. I had replaced the high pressure power steering line just as a preventative measure because the previous one that was a really high quality hose had just rubbed against something, and I just didn't like the fact that it had kind of rubbed it too much. So I replaced it, and that hose ended up failing.
Oh man!
And it actually, the car caught fire, but I caught it so quickly that it didn't do too much damage. And then when I did the head gaskets, I just had to fix a couple of wires. But yeah, having the right hoses in the right places and the right fitting.
Yeah.
So much time ahead.
I mean, since I looked at your car, it's definitely sparked a lot of like, what can we do? You know, I mean, your cooling systems, like, I mean, the Well, just get rid of the radiator cap on the radiator because you don't need it. Just like try and keep things as simple as possible, minimize the amount of leaks that are possible. And I've been thinking a lot about how both of these cars since looking at yours. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank you for building a cool car.
It's not all me, but like I said before, I had kind of brainstormed this with Dan at Pro Awesome, and he had created that article, cooling system test on their website. We had talked about it. He had talked to some guys back in, I think, Charlotte that work on NASCAR teams and stuff. And then I did my own research as well and realized the way that I have it now is kind of more like a purpose-built race car. And like I've seen a lot of drift cars use the same layout too, because the cooling is really difficult on a drift car.
Yeah.
So, but I think the biggest contributing factor was probably airflow and ducting, for sure. But I definitely kind of checked all the boxes of fixing the cooling system before that, picking the right water pump, increasing the flow, and a lot of other things. So
yeah,
it's been a road.
Because you said you were having cooling issues as well, and it's only been recently that you've kind of gotten it under control.
Yeah.
And is that, I mean, it's all those things like the design of the cooling system. You just to clarify for people, I don't know if I can find a picture of it, but you have a radium kind of auxiliary tank for the coolant. So like much bigger than the Subaru auxiliary tank would be.
Yeah, so it's a radium. It's an off-the-shelf. It's a universal expansion tank that's inside. It's divided with a swirl pot. So that swirl pot drains back into the engine where the water pump would be, and then the actual expansion tank is teed into the lower hose. And then I have the Killer B high flow water neck as well, and that. It just all works really well together. I do have a couple other things like the cylinder 4 cooling mod and stuff as well, but I didn't really see a huge gain from that. But it all contributes.
Yeah, it's all those things you've finally got put together to get the cooling system working, which is basically the dream. You're now living the dream from a cooling standpoint.
Yeah, it was. I think this is almost the first time that I've ever been able to do a 20-minute session in this car, which is amazing, especially I'm at 550 horsepower now.
And what turbo are you running again?
I'm running a Garrett GTX 3076 Gen 2 right now.
Okay, so I mean that's not even a huge turbo.
No, and actually, over the years, I've actually been downsizing. Because when I first switched from stock, with Crawford's help, I put a stock location 35 on this, and it was running about 360, 390 on pump gas at the time. And I was just chasing response because, like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves as a driver is not being able to go when I need to go. Like,
right.
Everybody just wants to. When I put my foot down, I need to go. So that's it.
Yeah,
your car definitely does that now for sure.
Well, that's
watching that video of the car on track. That thing is just like ripping.
Yeah, I've taken a few people. I have a friend who has a Noble in 400, and he case swapped it and put a big turbo on it. He has a sequential in it, and I took him for a ride in this car, and he's like, "This thing moves so hard." He was pretty surprised.
It's I think with Subarus, like chasing like people to get a power number in their head, they oftentimes pick a big turbo because that's what you need to hit this power number. Then you put it in the car, you drive the car, and they hate the car because it's like, well, like just like I said, well, I'm at the gas and nothing happens. I downshift, I'm at the gas, nothing happens. I have to go 2 gears down to get the revs high enough to finally get everything moving, and then it's off to the races for sure. And you're gonna have this big response, but like when you're trying to go faster on a track, like having a really meaty power band in the mid RPM range, like in a Subaru, like say from 4,000 to 6,000 RPMs, like that's kind of the sweet spot, unless you're able to rev really high.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem with these cars and their close ratio transmission. So like that's a big focus for me with this car as well. Like running Optima Ultimate Street Car with this car kind of opened my eyes to that, because we'll run like an autocross at a portion of the event, and the Corvette guys are gearing their cars to run the whole course in first gear. So
Wow.
say if it's a slightly higher speed, like we're hitting 70, like I'm going to be going to fourth gear at some point.
Wow.
So imagine all the time that I'm losing just shifting the car compared to a guy who can leave it in first gear.
Yeah.
So that's why I ended up putting the rally spec long gear ratios in this car.
Okay.
And that was I did that in 2019, going back to the Optimus Street Car. I put that gear set in, and then we refreshed the motor. It has valve train and springs and everything. So then I raised the rev limit to 8,000. So then we had basically the power band was from 4 to 8.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Wow.
For a Subaru. So I was able to bring it down a gear and lose third in some of the lower speed stuff. And we ended up winning the autocross at that event. So,
Nice.
Interesting. So let's just like explain that again. So you have a turbo where your power band you're saying is from 4,000 RPMs to 8,000 RPMs, and so this is the Gen 2 3076 you said. So which is, I mean, even for 550 horsepower, a 30R is not a common turbo to go to for that kind of a power target. But definitely going with a smaller turbo and still being able to hit that power target, that's where you're getting all this power band. And then you are running the rally spec long ratio six speed gears, which I think is longer third through sixth, or is it second through sixth? Yeah. Okay. So everything is taller. And so you're basically having to shift a lot less. So you have more mid-range power, and you're not having to shift as much. Yeah, I mean that is definitely a formula for going faster for sure.
that helped out a lot. But seems like I need to add more power now running with street cars.
Well, I mean, let's look to the future. I mean, what's on your horizon? What are you thinking? Like, is it do you want to make changes to the car, or like, I mean, you said like you learned a lot about tires and tire pressures. It was your first time at the track. I mean, it sounds to me like there's some time to be had just by going back and not making some big changes.
I just want to back up real quick. What was your top speed on the back straight with that gear ratio and that turbo?
I think it was 157.
Okay.
But
And was that power limited or gear limited?
I wasn't gear limited.
Okay.
Definitely, yeah. I think the car will do like 175 or more. I think it was maybe at like 6,000, maybe.
Okay.
We'll have to look at it, but yeah, I think Jackie was at like 166, and then Amir. If you watch Amir's video, he geared that car specifically. It looks like because it's gear limited at like 170.
Wow. I mean, that's still moving.
Take in on that watching that video. So.
Okay.
And then the other question, real quick: what size tires were you on while you were there?
I run what the rule set allows is the 265 width.
Okay.
So 265, 35, 18.
Yep.
And which tires? Were you on the Yokohamas?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they were 52.
Yeah, 52s. Okay. Yeah, man. 157. That's moving.
Yeah,
We'll get there.
Yeah, I think I need a little bit more mile an hour. And I was really trying to focus on the exit of that corner too. but a couple of times I just pushed the braking zone a little bit too far, and like going into that braking zone, the car I would compress, and then like a third of the way into it, there's a bump, so it would skip off of it, and I'd lose all the braking performance that I had prior, so that would kind of elongate it. So it's kind of hard to pick that braking zone right. So again, with we get the suspension figured out, we go back there, it should definitely help quite a bit.
Do you feel like you had too much aero drag for the track?
I don't think so. I think like Jackie has a lot more aero than me, but he also has 100 more horsepower. But I did go there with a lot of wing trimmed out. So like I put this wing on the car and I never adjusted it until Dakota. And I always kept it at a low angle because I couldn't really see how much it was helping. This car's traditionally, with the setup that I've always ran on it, has had a lot of rear grip. And I haven't always needed rear aero downforce. So I've always just been trying to dial in front grip to overpower the rear. And I think once I got to a point where the tires were kind of getting too hot or tire pressures, I started seeing the movement in the rear, and I did actually add quite a bit of rear wing to settle it down.
And did that help?
It did.
It did.
Yeah.
Now,
a lot of tire pressures too.
Because I don't remember very clearly. I don't recall that you have a lot of front aero on the car. Is that right?
I do have a
Sample.
custom splitter. It's built to the length of the rules, and it goes back to the front axle. It has the Pro Awesome front large diffusers.
You do have the diffusers. Okay.
Yeah. So there is
So that's
quite
going to
a
be.
bit of thought.
That would be pretty. So that's sufficient aero up front for sure.
I think so. I've
Yeah.
never had it in a tunnel or anything, so I'm really curious, like what's helping it or how much downforce the front makes. Haven't
Yeah.
done the whole yarn thing yet.
Right. Right. And then you have
We
to
all
figure
need,
out.
like, those-
Yeah.
We need those potentiometers that tell us what our ride height changes are at these speeds.
Yeah. Man. And then like the yarn, like does that actually, like what is how do you read the yarn? Like
Yeah,
that's
just seeing where the airflow goes.
Well, but you have to have somebody faster than you to drive in front of you to film the yarn, so you could actually see exactly what's going on. And unless what the powder, the dust that they were talking about. Flow-Vis,
Oil.
yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Well, and so what is on your horizon, Thomas? What are you thinking?
Like as far as changes on the car or events?
If anything, yeah.
I think for events, I was looking more towards GTA at the Ridge. I've always wanted to go to that track. I love the elevation there. I'm not sure beyond that right now. I have a 3-month-old at home with a 3-year-old, so.
Oh man, yeah.
Daycare is kind of crazy right now. So.
Yeah, for sure. A 3-month-old, yeah. That's you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, but as far as the car goes, gonna start talking with KW and see where I need to go as far as suspension wise. Probably something close to what Amir run, which is the competition 2-way. They're fully custom built for the vehicle.
Okay.
We're kind of talking with Outfront Motorsports too about an engine package a few months ago as well. So we'll kind of see this engine package. It doesn't have there's no head machining or head work, port and polish or any of that. It's just kind of
Really?
yeah.
Just stock heads with stock size valves or oversized valves?
1 mil over.
1 mil over. Okay.
Protect valves with Infinel exhaust valves, beehive springs and stuff like that. But as far as like porting, it doesn't have any. 2.5 liter, pretty much just a basic built car.
Mm-hmm. What
Are they the W25 heads or D25 heads?
Not
The the D25 heads were like the 2008 to 12 WRX, I think, and they'd get like a bump in compression, supposedly.
Yeah.
And then the D20 and the W25 heads were like the stock STI heads, I think, from that generation. I think.
Yeah.
Does that sound right, John?
It
Yeah.
would be the stock ones, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So STI heads. And are you running
Mhm.
cams or stock cams?
Yeah, it has GST 272 cam.
272s. Okay. Man, that is a very reasonable package, but it packs a punch.
Yeah,
What diff?
Oh.
What diff are you running? Are you running an aftermarket rear differential?
yeah, I do actually have OS Geiken front and rear dips.
Front and rear.
Are you listening,
Very
Trey?
nice.
Trey, get a diff.
That was another thing too, because I used to run a carbonetic in the rear back when carbonetic was like big in the States, and it, like I could take left hand corners at like intersections and just mat it, just drift the corner and stuff like that. But once I got the OS Geiken, the thing is just magic. Like it just puts the power down. It's just mind blowing. Like I remember having a couple conversations with Sean Murphy about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, I dropped 2 seconds from these dips. So yeah.
Wow.
Really,
It did change the car. Like the front and the rear diffs changed the car.
yeah. So like once I did the, so I was gonna get both at the same time, but they were out of stock with the front. So I did the rear in 2019, and then later on that year I did the front. And when I did the front, that's where you saw the biggest change, I would say, because then it allows you to drive it a little bit more like a front wheel drive, where you would turn in, use the power to pull you through the corner, the front wheels, and it will definitely do that on this car. And the rear doesn't slide out because it just puts the power down correctly. Basically, you just go flat.
Hell yeah.
Very cool. It's all about these details. Like you're saying, just getting everything to the same level. The diffs have to be at the level, the power has to be at the level, the cooling has to be able to make the power, the suspension. Yeah. You've got a well-designed package.
Are you going to help me talk Sean Murphy into coming out the Super Lap Battle Coda next year? Because I was really working on him for this year.
I'd love to see that car come out. I know he just finished it not too long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, Scotty might see it in a little bit. Yeah, that car, I mean, that car's super simple. It's pretty modest power, and man, that car just is so fast. And he's so fast. I think he would just really ruffle some feathers in the GTA world with that Subaru for sure.
Yeah, I'll see him in 3 weeks out in Utah, so I'll bust his balls a little bit more.
There you go.
Like, oh man, you missed a great event.
Yep.
Yeah, there's an Optima Ultimate Street Car event at the Motorsport campus later this
Okay,
October, and I got on the wait list because I signed up too late. But if I get on the wait list, or if I get into the event, I'll be out there.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, if nothing else, NASA's the end of this month, like the 26th, 27th. Go out and run some NASA TT.
I'd love to. I need to get my. I found like a little issue with the coilover so I was refueling the car at Toda, and I just like kind of glanced at the rear wheel, and I'm like, hey, that doesn't look right. The wheel's standing straight up. That's weird. So then I went back to the pit, and I was like, jack the car up and get under there. And I'm like, okay, it looks like it just shifted, what you did. And I was expecting to find the bolt like loose or something like that. I have a pretty good attention to detail. Like I go through and I paint mark everything, I torque everything, try to make sure everything's in line, but the bolt was still tight.
Like bolt stretched or something.
Or the coilover tab or something.
But I did find a small crack in the mounting tab on the coilover. So these guys.
And you still sent it on Sunday.
That was on Sunday.
It was on Sunday.
I know. Okay. You told me about, like, I think it might be cracked. The next thing you know, wow. I was like, dang, that guy's a savage. Love it.
Yeah, Jason came by, and I skipped the third session, and then I told him, he came by and he's like, "Hey, super session's coming up." He's like, "I think you're in the super session for street." And I was like, "Yeah, got a little issue. Probably shouldn't go out there." And he's like, "It's gonna be like a lot of eyes out there, and there's gonna be a lot of streams going on and stuff." I'm like, "All right, I'll just give it like 75% just because I don't know what can happen." And I was like, I ran a lap that was a second off my best.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, second off.
75%.
That's taking it easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
one lift somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, do you
That's
think
awesome.
you're going to stay in street class, or are you comfortable with staying in that class?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely not moving up because one of the things that I have with this car is bringing it to a level that I can't like afford to race to that. So, and I like to drive it like on the weekend too. So if I make it a full car, I can't enjoy it unless I'm at the track. It's just an expensive house.
Yeah.
So I'd
Yeah.
like to keep it a street car. And that's kind of what I get a lot of people that are always telling me like, "Oh, that's the real street car at street class." Like that. But and it's just because I kind of want to keep it what I think is sort of true to street class, not
Mhm.
Yeah.
like a race car or street class, which
Right.
some people need to be doing, but and that's fine if you have the means. You're obviously building your car within the rules. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of I used to have this vision of this car way back, and it would be like, oh, if I could just have a balanced car, 400 horsepower set, I don't need anything past that.
Right.
Obviously, well past that. So,
Yes. Well, but I mean, I mean, you basically carried the torch for Subaru at Super Lap, so a lot is working right. And I mean, like if you can just get the suspension, elevated to the level of the rest of the car. I mean, even just that, and now what you know about tires and tire pressures. I mean, there's time there. I have no doubt.
Well, and so Ryan's going to be finishing his blue car, and so Ryan's going to be out there with you next year, and the race is on, and I'm pretty excited about it because both of you guys are within striking distance of really
Current
knocking down
fastest Subaru. Yeah.
current fastest Subaru there, and so I mean next year is going to be pretty awesome. I'm excited to get back out there and see the whole thing go down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, Scotty, we have some things in store. I don't know that we're going to be at the pointy end, but I mean, the car should at least be able to turn 3 laps.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
if it
Pretty
starts to get out of the trailer, I'll be happy.
There you go.
You guys are
The little
killing me.
things, right?
Mhm.
Well, Thomas, as we've actually run a little bit over, so I want to thank you again very much for making the time and sitting down and chatting with us. Greatly appreciate that. As we're wrapping this up, Scotty, Dussex, any last questions that you want to throw out there?
Man, I would love to see you at the Ridge this summer. That's one of that track. If you like autocrossing and you like quick, snappy tracks, you're going to absolutely love that track, man. That track is a riot. You'll love it. So I hope to see you up there.
yeah, same here. I just got to get these coilovers figured out. That's the majority of it, but you can find a little bit of weight to take out. See how we do it.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah,
Scotty?
man, it was good talking to you. It was definitely just good talking to you.
No, thank
Solid
you.
guy with the cool car.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the fold, man. In the fold.
As we're wrapping it up, I mean, you mentioned you put up your fastest lap, so people need to go out there and check it out. Where can they find you on Instagram and Facebook?
Instagram, it's Thomas_Smith at 05. I also have a YouTube channel, which there's a link in my Instagram at the top of YouTube. Also have a Thomas Smith Racing page on Facebook as well. Kind of an athlete page, and always document what I'm doing with the car and the races that I'm at.
Yeah, we'll put those
cool.
links up down there
They'll be in the
as you're saying
description.
that. So somewhere.
Down somewhere. They'll be here in the description or somewhere in the picture. Yes, we will get that up. Well, Thomas, it's a pleasure talking with you and seeing what you've been doing with that car and just how awesome a result you had, and cannot wait to see what you do next.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It was a great conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man.
Yes. Well, and thanks everybody home for listening. Appreciate your support as always. And until next time, as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning. See you guys.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatirons.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.